The courtroom was silent. On one side sat Marcus Holloway, a billionaire CEO sneering next to his pristine mistress Clarissa. They were seconds from victory, about to leave his wife with nothing. Then the grand oak doors swung open. It wasn't a lawyer. It was Amelia, the poor wife. Looking exhausted, pushing a cheap double stroller, the mistress scoffed. She actually brought the props. Marcus demanded the judge remove them. But the judge, Evelyn Hayes, simply looked at the sleeping twins, then at a sealed file on her desk, and gave a tiny, dangerous smile. The secret she was about to expose wasn't just about the twins. It was about the devastating lie the mistress was hiding under her own designer dress. The air in courtroom 3B of the Los Angeles Superior Court was worth more than most people's homes. It was a sterile, refrigerated atmosphere, smelling faintly of expensive leather and ambition. Presiding over it all was Judge Evelyn Hayes, a woman whose sharp gaze was known to dismantle high-powered attorneys before they'd even finished their opening statements. On the petitioner's side sat Marcus Holloway, CEO of Vanguard Developments, a man who didn't just wear a suit, he weaponized it. His $24,000 Patek Philippe watch caught the fluorescent light as he impatiently tapped his fingers. Beside him, his lawyer, Mr. Blevin, a man with the smooth, reptilian features of a corporate predator, arranged his files with predatory precision. In the front row of the gallery just behind Marcus sat Clarissa Dupont. She was a vision in a cream-colored Chanel suit, her blonde hair pulled into a severe, elegant chignon. She was herself a high-powered attorney from the rival firm Sloan & Pierce, but today she was playing the role of the supportive, wronged partner. Her hand rested with deliberate maternal grace on the small, barely there swell of her stomach. She was pregnant, and her entire posture screamed victory. On the respondent's side, there was just one person, Amelia Holloway. She was not in rags. That would have been too theatrical. Instead, she was poor in the way wealth defines it. Her simple navy blue dress was clean, but had seen better years. Her shoes were practical flats. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, highlighting the dark, exhausted circles under her eyes. She clutched a worn manila envelope in her lap, her only defense. She had no lawyer. "All rise," the bailiff intoned. Judge Hayes entered, and the proceedings began. Blevin stood, his voice echoing with practiced, expensive empathy. "Your Honor, we are here for a simple dissolution. Mr. Holloway has, with great pain, filed for divorce on the grounds of grievous infidelity." He paused, letting the words hang. Clarissa dabbed at a non-existent tear with a silk handkerchief. While Mr. Holloway would be well within his rights to sue for damages emotional and reputational, Blevin continued, he is generously seeking only a summary judgment. He wishes to dissolve this union, provide a statutory minimum severance, and move on with his life. He asks for nothing, save for his freedom from a marriage built on deceit. Judge Hayes stared her face, impassive. "Deceit, Mr. Blevin. Those are strong words. I assume you have proof?" "We do, Your Honor. Irrefutable." Blevin picked up a thick, sealed document. "We present Exhibit A, a certified notarized medical declaration from the Beverly Hills Fertility Clinic, signed by the esteemed Dr. Alistair Finch. This document proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that my client, Mr. Holloway, is medically sterile, and has been for several years." A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Clarissa looked directly at Amelia, a small venomous smile playing on her lips. The respondent, Mrs. Holloway. Blevin said, gesturing to Amelia as if she were a piece of unpleasant furniture, has claimed her recent conception resulted in twins. This is, of course, a biological impossibility, a desperate, fraudulent attempt to secure a payout. Therefore, Blevin concluded, we ask the court to nullify any and all claims Mrs. Holloway might make on the Holloway estate based on this profound act of fraud. Judge Hayes turned her gaze to Amelia. Mrs. Holloway, you are here without counsel. Do you have a response to this very serious allegation? Amelia's voice was quiet, but it didn't tremble. Yes, Your Honor. She stood clutching her envelope. He's lying. Blevin let out an exasperated sigh. Lying, madam, this is a sworn affidavit from one of the top specialists in the country. Are you accusing Dr. Finch of perjury? No, Amelia said, her eyes fixed on the judge. I'm accusing him of it. Those children, my children, they are his. Marcus himself finally spoke, his voice a low, dangerous growl. She's delusional. She knows I'm sterile. We've known for years. Your Honor, Blevin interjected, this is a desperate delay tactic. The respondent has no evidence, no counsel, no case. We move for a default judgment. Judge Hayes looked at Amelia. Mrs. Holloway, you must present a legal argument. A simple, he's lying, will not suffice in the face of medical evidence. I have my own evidence, Amelia said, holding up the manila envelope. But I didn't know how to submit it. He froze all our assets. I have $42 in my bank account. I couldn't hire a lawyer. I couldn't even afford to file a motion. Pathetic, Marcus muttered. Clarissa smirked. Blevin smiled, sensing the kill. Your Honor, she has nothing. We rest our case. The judge looked as if she were about to speak, to perhaps grant the motion and end the hearing. And then the grand courtroom doors creaked open. The sound, a heavy creak of old oiled wood, made everyone turn. Framed in the doorway was a young woman in scrubs, looking terrified. It was Amelia's younger sister, Chloe. She wasn't alone. She was pushing a large, cumbersome, and clearly second-hand double stroller. The courtroom's silence thickened, becoming heavy and suffocating. Chloe hesitantly pushed the stroller over the threshold and up the aisle, the squeak of a bad wheel echoing in the cavernous room. Inside the stroller, wrapped in simple cotton blankets, were 2 sleeping infants. Marcus Holloway went rigid. His face, which had been a mask of bored arrogance, flushed a deep, violent crimson. What is this? He seethed, rising halfway from his chair. Clarissa shot to her feet, her voice a sharp, sudden shriek that shattered the decorum. Your Honor, this is an outrage. This is harassment. She's brought props. Marcus found his voice turning his rage on the judge. Get those things out of here. This is a court of law, not a daycare. This is a circus. I demand they be removed. Blevin was instantly at his side. Your Honor, I must strenuously object. The respondent is turning this hearing into a media stunt. This is a blatant attempt to manipulate the court and cause my client emotional distress. Judge Hayes slammed her gavel. The sharp crack silenced the room. Silence! Her voice was a whip. Everyone will be seated. Now. Marcus and Blevin sat. Clarissa, trembling with indignation, slowly lowered herself back to her seat. The judge looked at Chloe, who was frozen by the respondent's table. You may remain, she said calmly. Park the stroller beside your sister. This small act of validation seemed to drain the blood from Marcus's face. He looked at Judge Hayes as if seeing her for the first time, not as a facilitator, but as an opponent. Amelia placed a trembling hand on the stroller. She looked at her husband. They are not things. Marcus, they are not props. They are your son and your daughter, Leo and Luna. Marcus let out a short, barking laugh. It was a terrible sound, devoid of humor. My children, Amelia, have you lost your mind? We have proof, certified, irrefutable. You can't just manifest paternity by walking into a courtroom. It's pathetic. Clarissa leaned forward, whispering just loud enough for the first few rows to hear. So desperate, it's truly sad. She needs psychiatric help. Amelia ignored them both. Her gaze was locked on Judge Hayes. "Your Honor," Amelia said, her voice finding a new, harder edge. "I told you I had evidence. I have it here." She held up the manila envelope. Blevin scoffed. "And what precisely is in that envelope, Mrs. Holloway? A greeting card, a horoscope, a mother's intuition. It will not stand against a notarized declaration from the Beverly Hills Fertility Clinic." "Bailiff," Judge Hayes said, cutting off the lawyer. "Retrieve the document from Mrs. Holloway." The bailiff took the simple envelope from Amelia's hand and passed it to the judge. The courtroom held its breath. Marcus watched a flicker of genuine uncertainty in his eyes for the first time. What could she possibly have? Judge Hayes slid her finger under the flap and opened it. She pulled out a single folded sheaf of papers. She read. The courtroom watched her face. Her eyebrows, perfectly arched, shot up toward her hairline. She read the document again. She looked down at the twins, then at Marcus, then back at the document. "Mr. Blevin," the judge said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Your Honor," Blevin said, sensing a shift in the wind. "You submitted Exhibit A, the sterility report from Dr. Alistair Finch. The date on this report is October 15th of last year." "That is correct, Your Honor," Blevin said, puffing his chest. "Ironclad." "And Mrs. Holloway," the judge continued, "has submitted this." She held up the paper. "A prenatal paternity test from Genesis Diagnostics, dated February 10th of last year. 9 months before your test, Mr. Holloway." The judge let the silence stretch. "This test," she said, her eyes boring into Marcus, "states that there is a 99.9999% probability that Marcus Holloway is the biological father of the twins." Pandemonium. The courtroom exploded. Blevin was on his feet, his reptilian smoothness gone, his face mottled. "Objection. Objection. It's inadmissible. Foundation chain of custody speculation," he stammered, throwing legal jargon at the wall to see what would stick. Marcus was chalk white. "She faked it. That's impossible. She stole my DNA. It's fabricated. She's a con artist." Amelia finally turned to look at him, her eyes flashing with a year's worth of stored pain. "I didn't steal it, Marcus. I used your electric toothbrush, the one you threw in the trash when you bought your new gold-plated one. I sent it in with my own blood sample when I was 10 weeks pregnant." She looked back at the judge. "I knew, Your Honor. I knew he would try something like this. He grew cold the moment I told him I was pregnant. He started accusing me. He said I was trapping him. I knew I had to protect myself. I had to protect them." Blevin seized on this. "A toothbrush. Your Honor, this is junk science. It's a novelty kit. It has no legal standing. Our exhibit is a medical procedure conducted in a sterile environment, signed, sealed, and notarized. You must throw this out." Judge Hayes held up a hand. "Calm yourself, Mr. Blevin. You are incorrect. A DNA test from a certified lab like Genesis Diagnostics is absolutely admissible regardless of how the sample was obtained, as long as the chain of custody from the lab is sound. And this report," she tapped the paper, "is fully certified." She fixed Blevin with a stare. "So we find ourselves with a paradox. We have 2 contradictory and legally admissible pieces of evidence. One says Mr. Holloway is the father. The other says he cannot be." She leaned forward. "One of these documents, gentlemen, is a lie." Marcus was shaking now, his fury warring with a new creeping panic. "Hers is the lie. Mine is from a doctor. I want her sanctioned. I want her charged with perjury for submitting a faked document." Clarissa, for the first time, looked truly nervous. Her perfectly manicured hand was no longer resting lovingly on her stomach. It was gripping the wooden gallery railing so hard her knuckles were white. Their plan, was contingent on Marcus's sterility being an established fact. This complicated everything. A serious matter indeed, Judge Hayes mused, looking at the two documents laid out before her. A direct conflict of facts. A test from Genesis Diagnostics versus a report from Dr. Finch's clinic. She looked directly at Marcus Holloway, and her eyes were like chips of ice. "Unless, Mr. Holloway," she said, her voice dropping, "you are lying about which document is true. Perhaps you aren't sterile. Perhaps you bribed Dr. Finch to create a fraudulent report to escape your marital duties." "I did not," Marcus blustered, but the accusation hung in the air. Bribing a doctor was exactly the kind of thing people believed he would do, or... The judge continued, her voice silky smooth. "Perhaps both documents are true." Blevin and Marcus exchanged a confused look. "Your Honor," Blevin said slowly, "that's not possible." "Oh, but it is, Mr. Blevin," Judge Hayes said. "And that is where the real story is. The story your client so desperately tried to conceal." She held up the two reports. "Look at the dates. They are the key. Mrs. Holloway's paternity test, February 10th. The twins were conceived in late January. Mr. Holloway's sterility test, October 15th. The twins were born in September." She let the timeline sink in. "This means," the judge said, her voice ringing with judicial clarity, "Mr. Holloway was fertile in February and sterile in October. Dead." Silence. Marcus's face crumpled. He understood in that microsecond exactly where this was going. He had been so clever, so sure of his infallible plan, that he'd missed the one detail that would destroy him. Blevin, still processing, flipped through his own file. But, Your Honor, Mr. Holloway's affidavit, it clearly states, has been sterile for years." "Exactly, Mr. Blevin," Judge Hayes said, her voice turning to steel. "Mr. Holloway, you just committed perjury. In my courtroom, you signed a sworn affidavit stating you have been sterile for years when your own submitted evidence shows you were only tested last October. You lied under oath." This was the moment. The click of the trap. Marcus Holloway was cornered. It was a misstatement." He stammered, his eyes darting between the judge and his lawyer. "A turn of phrase, I meant. I am sterile. I assumed it had been for years. You assumed?" Judge Hayes's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "You built your entire case, your claim of infidelity, your attempt to leave your wife and two newborn children destitute on an assumption. You filed a false report under penalty of perjury. In this state, Mr. Holloway, that is a felony." Blevin, seeing his retainer evaporating, tried frantically to do damage control. "Your Honor, a simple clerical error in the affidavit's wording. My client was emotionally distressed by his wife's betrayal. We can amend the filing." "Save it, Mr. Blevin," Judge Hayes snapped. "You'd be wise to stop talking, because, you see, it gets infinitely worse for your client." She turned to her clerk. "When I reviewed the preliminary filings this morning, I saw this glaring discrepancy in the dates. It made me curious. So I took the liberty of subpoenaing the full medical file from Dr. Alistair Finch's clinic, not just the convenient one-page summary you provided, Mr. Blevin." Blevin went pale. Marcus looked as if he was going to be physically sick right there on the polished floor. "And Dr. Finch's private sealed notes," the judge continued, reading from a new file, "are deeply illuminating. Mr. Holloway, you didn't just wake up sterile in October. You were diagnosed with a severe rapid onset condition. Specifically, she read from the file, catastrophic bilateral testicular failure due to an aggressive, unmanaged varicocele you apparently ignored for more than a decade despite medical advice. She looked up, her gaze pinning Marcus to his chair. Dr. Finch's notes state, and I quote, "Patient sperm viability was plummeting. He was, in my professional opinion, in the final days, possibly hours of his reproductive viability, when he claims to have last been with his wife." The test in October merely confirmed what had already concluded total and permanent sterility. Judge Hayes then turned the full force of her attention to Amelia, her expression softening for the first time. "Mrs. Holloway," she said, her voice gentle, "it seems your twins weren't just children. They were a 1 in a billion miracle, conceived in the absolute final window of your husband's fertility." Amelia's hands flew to her mouth, and a ragged sob tore from her throat. It wasn't a sob of sadness, but of vindication. All those months he had gaslighted her, calling her a whore, a liar, making her doubt her own reality. And all this time the truth was this: the courtroom was buzzing. "He framed her," someone whispered loudly. Marcus just stared, his multi-billion-dollar empire, his reputation, his entire sense of self crumbling. He was the father. He knew he was fertile when they were conceived. He knew he was sterile now, and he had still tried to brand her an adulterer to get out of paying for his own children. His entire case, his entire narrative of being the wronged husband had just been officially, publicly, and humiliatingly obliterated. All eyes were on Marcus. All except for Amelia's. She was watching Clarissa. Clarissa DuPont was standing her face, a mask of chalky disbelief and incandescent rage. She was not looking at Marcus. She was looking at Judge Hayes. This is a violation!" She shrieked, her voice cracking all pretense of the graceful, supportive partner gone. "A gross violation of privacy. You can't release a person's private medical data like that." Judge Hayes leveled a gaze at her. "I can Ms. DuPont when it is central to a case of perjury and fraudulent claims in my courtroom. You are an officer of the court. You of all people should know that. Sit. Down." "No," Clarissa screamed. He told me he was sterile. He said it was impossible. He promised me." Her mind was clearly spinning, working frantically. She wasn't angry for Marcus. She was angry at him, her entire plan, her future. And then, like a freight train in a tunnel, the second more horrifying realization hit her. It was so palpable the entire courtroom saw the moment it landed. If Marcus became permanently sterile, last October, her pregnancy, she had proudly claimed 3 months pregnant. It was now November. Her hand, which had been gripping the railing, flew to her stomach. It was not a loving, maternal caress. It was a gesture of pure, abject horror. She slowly turned her head, her eyes wide to look at Marcus. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling. Marcus, finally understanding the new immediate source of her panic, looked back at her, his expression desperate. "Clarissa, wait. Don't." "You knew." Clarissa DuPont screamed, a sound of pure animalistic rage that echoed off the marble walls. "You knew you were sterile, and you let me believe." Blevin, his own career now circling the drain, weakly pleaded, "Your Honor, order. Please, order." Clarissa laughed, a high, hysterical sound. "He lied to me. He's sterile. He's been sterile for a year, and he's... She stopped, choking on her own words. But it was too late. Everyone in the room, the judge, the reporters, the clerks, and Amelia had done the simple, devastating math. Judge Hayes leaned into her microphone. "Ms. DuPont, are you admitting in open court that your current pregnancy is not Mr. Holloway's?" Clarissa had completely, totally lost control. She was hyperventilating, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. He tricked me. I thought he said he wanted a family. He said—" It was in that moment that Amelia, her voice quiet, but carrying across the stunned silence, spoke. "He didn't trick you, Clarissa. You tricked yourself." That was all it took. The quiet truth pushed the other woman over the edge. "You!" Clarissa shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at Amelia. You poor pathetic. You planned this. You—" She lunged. With a guttural scream, she tried to get past the wooden railing, her hands clawed, aiming for Amelia's face. "I'll kill you! I'll kill you!" The bailiffs were on her in an instant, grabbing her arms. She thrashed her $5,000 Chanel suit, completely rumpled her chignon, unraveling. "It's his! It's his!" She screamed, even as her eyes, wild with panic, told the truth. She knew it wasn't. And now the entire world knew it too. The courtroom was a vacuum, all sound, and air sucked out by Clarissa's primal scream and subsequent pathetic collapse. She was now a heap of ruined Chanel, held upright by two stone-faced bailiffs, her sobs the only sound. Marcus sat paralyzed, a breathing statue of a man, his empire and his ego shattered by the revelation of his children, followed by the revelation of her child. Mr. Blevin, sensing the legal blast radius, was already packing his movements, swift and silent, like a rat deserting a sinking ship. Judge Hayes looked at the scene with utter disdain. She waited for the bailiffs to get Clarissa settled back into the gallery, a prisoner now rather than a guest. "Well," the judge said, her voice a cold, sharp instrument, "this has been illuminating." She turned her full, unadulterated focus on Marcus. "Mr. Holloway, this court has heard more than enough. Your case is a shambles built on a foundation of malicious lies. Your petition for divorce on the grounds of infidelity is, needless to say, summarily denied. This court validates Mrs. Holloway's paternity test. The twins Leo and Luna are unequivocally yours. Your sworn affidavit, Exhibit A, is a fraudulent document. I am referring this matter, along with my full case notes and a transcript of this hearing, to the District Attorney's Office for immediate charges of felony perjury." Wait. The voice was quiet, but it sliced through the judge's ruling like a diamond. Everyone, the judge, the bailiffs, the weeping Clarissa, the catatonic Marcus, turned. Amelia Holloway was standing. Her hands were no longer trembling. Her face, tear-streaked and exhausted, was now set with a terrible cold clarity. "Your Honor," Amelia said, her voice gaining strength, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you are not done. You have found the truth about the twins. You have found the truth about her pregnancy." She flicked her hand toward Clarissa in a gesture of dismissal. "But you have not found the whole truth. You haven't found the real secret." Judge Hayes raised an eyebrow. This was unexpected. "Mrs. Holloway, I believe this court has sufficient grounds for judgment. Ms. DuPont's personal issues are not directly relevant to the dissolution of your marriage." "They are, Your Honor," Amelia insisted. "They are. Because it wasn't just about him." She pointed at Marcus. "And it wasn't just about me. It was about everything. His assets, his company. She wasn't just his mistress. She was a corporate spy, and she was about to steal his entire company. Not just from me. From him." Marcus slowly lifted his head. His eyes were blank, unfocused. What are you talking about, spy?" Clarissa's sobbing hitched. A new, sharp terror cut through her hysterics. No, she's lying. She's just trying to... Amelia ignored her and looked directly at Marcus, her gaze pitiless. You were so angry, so determined to destroy me. You froze my bank accounts. You cancelled my credit cards. You took my car. You left me with nothing. But in your all-consuming, arrogant rage, you forgot one simple little thing. She held up her phone. You forgot that I set up the family's cloud storage account 5 years ago. The one I pay $15 a month for from my old private account you didn't know about. And you forgot that when you gave her that brand new top-of-the-line iPad Pro, you signed her into our family account. Every note she took, every photo she saved, and every single iMessage she sent has been backing up to my cloud. For 6 months. The color which had been gone from Clarissa's face somehow drained even further. She looked physically ill. No, that's not possible. The backup was off. You only turned it off last week, Clarissa, Amelia said calmly, after the most important messages had already been saved. I was looking for old photos of Leo and Luna, and I found these. She turned the phone to the clerk. Your Honor, I present Exhibit C, a complete time-stamped log of messages between Clarissa DuPont and... Amelia paused, letting the name hang in the air. A Mr. Arthur Vance. If the previous revelations were explosions, this was a nuclear bomb. Marcus shot to his feet, his chair crashing backward. Vance! He roared. Arthur Vance. The name was venom in the Los Angeles business community. He was the head of Sloan & Pierce. He was Marcus's former partner, his bitterest rival, the man who had tried to stage a hostile takeover of Vanguard Developments 3 years prior. The man Marcus hated more than anyone on Earth. She's lying, Marcus yelled, his mind unable to process this. It's a fake she. She photoshopped it. Tell them, Clarissa. Tell them it's a lie. Clarissa was silent, her body rigid with terror. They're not faked, Marcus, Amelia said, her voice echoing in the stunned room. Let me read them for you. Let me read them for the court. She scrolled. October 30th, 8:15 p.m. From Clarissa to Arthur Vance. Problem. The idiot, that's you. Marcus just told me he's sterile. The doctor confirmed it today. The Amelia problem is solved, but our plan is dead. He'll never leave her for me if I can't give him an heir. All this work. For nothing. Marcus was shaking his head, a low, no, sound coming from his throat. Amelia continued. Reply from Arthur Vance. 8:17 p.m. Dead, don't be stupid, Clarissa. This isn't a problem. This is an opportunity. He's an arrogant fool. He wants a legacy more than he wants a wife. He'll believe in a miracle. You just need to provide one. Get it done. Amelia swiped. Clarissa to Arthur. 10:30 p.m. But how I can't just... I need to be... Sure. Who? Arthur to Clarissa. 10:31 p.m. It has to be mine. It secures the lineage. It keeps it in the family, so to speak. I'll book you a flight to Geneva. Meet me Friday. We'll solidify our partnership. Amelia looked up at Marcus. His face was a mask of pure, uncomprehending horror. He looked as if he'd been shot. The infidelity was one thing, but this was a calculated biological conspiracy with his greatest enemy. And then Amelia said, the best part. Just 2 weeks ago, Clarissa to Arthur. It worked. I'm pregnant. I told him. He's crying, Arthur, literally weeping. He's calling me his savior. He's pathetic. I almost feel sorry for him. Amelia paused, then read the final damning message. Arthur to Clarissa. Don't. Pity is for the weak. Now the real work begins. He's filing for divorce. Once you're married, you'll be on the board. we'll start moving assets to the new Shell Corp in the Caymans. Within 2 years, Vanguard is ours, and he'll be left holding his miracle baby. It was all there. The entire breathtakingly cynical plot. Corporate espionage, a baby trap, a complete betrayal, not just of a wife, but of the fool who had replaced her. Clarissa finally broke. She lunged forward, grasping the wooden railing, her eyes wild. "No, he's lying. Arthur is he. He threatened me. He made me. He said he'd ruin my career. Marcus, baby. You have to believe me. I did it. I did it for us. He was going to... She was babbling, but it was far too late. Marcus Holloway stood perfectly still. The silence from him was more terrifying than his rage. He was shaking, not with fear, but with a new, volcanic and apocalyptic fury. He slowly, very slowly turned his head. He looked at Clarissa. He really saw her for the first time. Not as a prize, not as a victim, but as the architect of his total annihilation. "You," he whispered, his voice a low, strangled rasp. "You were going to give my company, my father's company, to Arthur Vance." His voice cracked on the name. The betrayal wasn't the sex. It wasn't the lie. It was the business. It was the legacy. "You were going to pass his bastard off as my son. Marcus, please." Clarissa wept, seeing the look in his eyes. "I love you. You bitch." He roared, a sound of pure, primal agony and rage. He lunged not at Amelia, not at the judge, but at her. "I'll kill you. I'll kill you both." The silence that fell over the courtroom was a living thing. It was heavy, suffocating, and absolute. The text messages Amelia had read from her phone hung in the air, an indictment more powerful than any legal argument. Every person in the room, the judge, the clerks, the stunned bailiffs, was processing the sheer, layered audacity of the conspiracy. Marcus Holloway was not looking at Amelia. He was not looking at the judge. His entire being was focused on Clarissa. His face, which had been pale with panic, was now slowly suffused with a dark venous crimson. His breathing was a low, ragged hiss. This was a betrayal he understood. This wasn't a matter of biology or love. This was business. This was a coup. Clarissa, on the other hand, was shrinking. The color had drained from her face, leaving behind a waxy, terrifying pallor. She was staring at Amelia's phone as if it were a bomb. "No," she whispered, the sound barely audible. "No. She faked them. She faked those texts, just like she faked that junk science DNA test. She's a liar. Tell them, Marcus. Tell them." Amelia didn't flinch. She simply turned her phone to the clerk's desk. "I have the device logs, Your Honor. The cloud sync metadata with IP addresses and timestamps all originating from Ms. DuPont's devices at the Holloway penthouse. She can't deny it. It's all here." This cold, factual statement seemed to sever the last thread holding Marcus's lawyer. Mr. Blevin, who had been frozen in a half-crouch, stood up, his face a mask of professional horror. He snapped his briefcase shut. "Your Honor," he said, his voice trembling with a lawyer's righteous fear. In light of this extraordinary and new information which my client, Mr. Holloway, clearly and maliciously withheld from his own counsel, I must formally move to withdraw as counsel effective immediately. I have been compromised. My firm has been compromised. We cannot be party to this level of multifaceted fraud. Judge Hayes didn't even blink. Motion granted, Mr. Blevin. You are dismissed. I would strongly advise you to find your own counsel, as it is highly likely you will be called as a material witness in several upcoming investigations. Blevin looked at Marcus with undisguised contempt, then all but fled the courtroom, his expensive shoes clicking in a rapid, panicked retreat. Marcus Holloway was now in every conceivable way alone. He stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate, like an apex predator uncoiling. "You!" He growled, his voice a low vibration of pure hatred. He was still looking only at Clarissa. "You bitch, with Vance Arthur. Vance, you let him. You were going to take my company, and give it to him." The sheer personal nature of the betrayal, his greatest business rival, had eclipsed everything else. Clarissa, seeing her last protector, was now her most immediate threat snapped. All the poise, the Chanel suit elegance vanished, replaced by a raw, gutter-level panic. "You deserved it," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You deserve it. You're a fool, Marcus. A weak, arrogant, pathetic fool. You lied to me. You used me. You told me you were sterile. You used me to get rid of her. You said we'd have everything. I am sterile." Marcus roared, then stopped his own words, trapping him. Clarissa laughed, a high, terrible, hysterical sound. "Exactly. You are. You knew it. You knew it for a year. And you let me get pregnant with... She choked on the words, unable to finish the confession. "With whose baby? Clarissa," Marcus bellowed, taking a step toward the gallery. "Whose is it? Is it Vance's? Is that it? You were going to pass Arthur Vance's bastard off as my heir. Enough!" Judge Hayes's voice was no longer a whip. It was a cannon. She slammed the gavel, once, twice, 3 times, the crack, 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 echoing like gunshots. "This is not a soap opera. This is a court of law. And I have just heard confessions to multiple compounding felonies. Bailiff, secure Miss DuPont. She is a flight risk. Place her in custody." 2 large bailiffs moved instantly, pulling a suddenly unresisting Clarissa from the gallery. Her fight was gone. She was limp, sobbing her high-fashion armor, now just a rumpled, tear-stained costume. "No, please," she wept as they put her hands behind her back. "It was Arthur. It was all Arthur. He made me. He's powerful. He threatened my career. He threatened me." Judge Hayes watched her face carved from stone. "Ms. DuPont, you had no career. You had a scheme. Take her away." Clarissa was led weeping through a side door. The heavy click of the lock seemed to seal her fate. The courtroom was silent again, save for the sound of Marcus Holloway's ragged breathing. Judge Hayes let the silence stretch. Then she fixed her gaze on him. "Mr. Holloway?" He turned dazed to the bench. "You are in one sense," the judge said, her voice a cold academic monotone, "the victim of a stunning and calculated betrayal. It seems Miss DuPont and your rival Mr. Vance were partners in more ways than one. You have every right, and I'm sure every inclination, to pursue civil damages against them, for what is by any measure a massive conspiracy to commit corporate fraud. The evidence provided by Mrs. Holloway will be invaluable to you in that pursuit." Marcus nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. He saw a lifeline. He was the victim. "Yes, Your Honor, that's right. I am the victim here. I was blinded by her, did she? Do not." The judge's voice snapped, cutting him off so sharply he flinched. "Interrupt me again. Because while you may be a victim, you are not the only victim. In this room, in this case, you are without question the perpetrator." Marcus's face fell. "Let us review," Judge Hayes said, lacing her fingers. "You petition this court for divorce, claiming infidelity. To support this claim, you submit a sworn affidavit, Exhibit A, a document you knew to be a lie. You committed a felony, right here, in my courtroom. You knew you were fertile when these twins were conceived. You knew your sterility was a recent development. You saw a convenient coincidence of biology, and you decided to weaponize it. She leaned forward. You tried to brand your wife the mother of your newborn children, an adulterer. You gaslighted her for months. You isolated her. You terrorized her. You froze her assets. You left a woman who had just undergone a high-risk delivery of twins with $42. You did this not out of emotional distress, as your departed lawyer so pathetically claimed. You did this out of greed. You did this to avoid your most basic, fundamental human responsibility. She paused, her eyes boring into him. Your petition for divorce on the grounds of infidelity is denied. Your affidavit is hereby being referred to the district attorney's office. You will be charged with felony perjury. Do you understand me? Marcus could only nod his throat, working. Now, the judge continued, we turn to Mrs. Holloway's counter-petition. Mrs. Holloway. Amelia, who had been standing silently by her children, looked up. Your counter-petition for divorce on the grounds of extreme cruelty, adultery, and attempted fraud is granted effective immediately. You are a free woman. Amelia closed her eyes, and one long, slow tear of pure relief rolled down her cheek. We move, the judge said, her voice hardening again, to the division of assets. The community property laws of California would normally dictate a 50-50 split. However, I am finding in this case that such a split would be a gross, unconscionable miscarriage of justice. The law allows for discretion in cases of egregious harm and the deliberate misappropriation of marital funds. Mr. Holloway, your actions, freezing your wife's assets while simultaneously spending, I assume, lavishly on your co-conspirator Miss DuPont, more than qualify. Therefore, she said, I am awarding Mrs. Holloway 70% of all liquid marital assets. This includes all bank accounts, all stocks, all bonds, and all pension funds. 70, Marcus roared, finding his voice. That's theft. That's punitive. You can't. It is punitive, Mr. Holloway, the judge thundered back. You used your immense wealth as a weapon to try and financially execute your wife and children. You don't get to complain about the blowback. Furthermore, I am awarding Mrs. Holloway the marital home in Pacific Palisades. You will vacate the premises by 5 p.m. today. I am awarding her the Mercedes G-Wagon and the Range Rover. You may keep your sports cars. You will need them to drive to your new, much smaller apartment. Marcus was shaking his head aghast. She did nothing for that money I built, that company. I built it all. You are correct, Mr. Holloway. The judge said, her voice becoming dangerously quiet. You did build it, and you were just about to let it be stolen by your most hated rival, all because you were blinded by your own pathological arrogance. You have proven yourself to be a reckless, impulsive, and catastrophic steward of your own legacy. She looked at him. Your children's financial future, their entire lives, cannot be tied to the whims of a man who would commit a felony to save a few dollars. Therefore, I am awarding Mrs. Holloway 50% of your controlling shares in Vanguard Developments to be held in trust for Leo and Luna Holloway until they are 25. The blood drained from Marcus's face. He understood. This was worse than 70%. This was the kill shot. You just lost control of your own company, Mr. Holloway. The judge stated, her voice devoid of emotion. Your ex-wife is now the single largest shareholder. She is for all intents and purposes your new boss. I trust she will have the good sense to call an emergency board meeting and have you removed. Marcus made a gagging sound and slumped in his chair, utterly broken. Finally, the judge said, we address the children you so cruelly called props and things. Mrs. Holloway is awarded full sole legal and physical custody of the twins Leo and Luna Holloway. Your behavior has been monstrous. You denied their existence. You are a clear and present danger to their emotional and physical well-being. Therefore, a permanent restraining order is in effect. You will stay 500 yards away from them and their mother. You will have no contact. If you wish to ever see your children, you will complete a 1-year psychiatric evaluation, 100 hours of court-mandated anger management, and 100 hours of advanced parenting classes. Then you may petition this court for a 30-minute supervised visit. And I assure you, Mr. Holloway, I will be reading that petition very, very closely. As for support, she concluded, you will pay $50,000 per month in child support and $20,000 per month in rehabilitative alimony for 5 years. You will pay for 100% of the children's health insurance and future education. You will also, of course, be paying all of Mrs. Holloway's legal fees, which, given that she is about to hire the best legal team in Los Angeles to countersue you and protect her new majority interest in Vanguard, will be substantial. Gavel, the judge said, rapping it once hard. We are adjourned. The room exploded. Reporters who had been held back burst in shouting questions. Mr. Holloway, is it true you're sterile? Marcus, did you commit perjury? Mr. Holloway, who is Arthur Vance. This finally broke Marcus Holloway. The humiliation, the loss, the utter destruction of his ego. It was too much. With a primal scream, he lunged not at Amelia but at the judge's bench. You can't, I'll have you disbarred. I'll ruin you, that's my company. 2 bailiffs tackled him before he'd taken 2 steps, slamming him face first onto the polished floor. He was restrained, a pathetic screaming, thrashing mess of rage and expensive wool. Amelia stood, her whole body trembling, with the adrenaline of a battle finally won. Her sister Chloe was openly sobbing with relief, her arms wrapped around Amelia's. It's over, Amelia whispered to her. It's really over. She calmly bent down, checking on the twins. Leo was just starting to wake up, his little fist waving. Luna was still fast asleep. She picked up her old worn manila envelope from the table. She looked at it, then tossed it into a nearby trash can. She didn't need it anymore. With her sister at her side, she pushed the stroller down the center aisle. She passed the spot where Clarissa had been, where the scent of expensive, panicked perfume still hung in the air. She passed the reporters who now turned their cameras and microphones on her. Mrs. Holloway, how do you feel? What will you do with the company? Amelia, you're the richest woman in L.A. She ignored them. She reached the back row where Marcus was being hauled to his feet by the bailiffs. His $20,000 watch cracked his suit, ripped his face, a mask of spittle and fury. Amelia. He screamed, his voice raw and desperate. He thrashed in the bailiff's grip. Amelia, please don't do this. They're my children. You need me. You can't run a company. Please, I built it. Amelia stopped. The entire room, even the reporters, went silent just to hear. She turned her back to the open doors, the flashing cameras of the press framing her like a bizarre, blinding halo. She looked at the man she once loved, the man who had tried to erase her. You're right, Marcus. I don't know how to run a company. But unlike you, I'm smart enough to hire people who do. And I'm smart enough to know a liar when I see one. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through every other sound in the room. You wanted to erase us, she said. You wanted us to be nothing. You wanted to be the only thing that mattered. She nodded at the bailiffs holding him, at the locked door where Clarissa had disappeared, at the empty chair where his lawyer had abandoned him. Now, she gestured to the stroller, are everything. We are the legacy. We are the company. We are the future. She held his gaze. And you are the nothing. She turned and pushed the stroller out into the hallway. She didn't run. She walked. Her sister was beside her. The faint squeak of the cheap stroller wheel was the only sound that followed her, until the grand oak doors swung shut, leaving the chaos, the flashing lights, and the broken man behind. Justice isn't always blind. Sometimes it sees every single sordid detail. Amelia Holloway walked out of that courtroom with her head held high, her children safe, and the future her husband tried to steal. Marcus lost his company, his reputation, and the family he threw away. And Clarissa. She lost her career, her lover, and her freedom, all for a lie that collapsed under the weight of its own greed. The judge didn't just expose one secret. She exposed their character or lack thereof. What do you think was the judge's ruling fair? Did Marcus and Clarissa get exactly what they deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of an underdog's ultimate victory, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see justice served, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more dramatic stories every single week. Don't forget to click that notification bell so you never miss an update. The vintage Cabernet Sauvignon cost $4,000 a bottle, but as it dripped from Ilara's hair, staining her white dress a violent crimson, it signaled something far more expensive, the total bankruptcy of the Sterling dynasty. The entire ballroom went silent. Victoria Sterling, the woman holding the empty glass, stood with a cruel smirk, believing she had just put her beggar of a daughter-in-law in her place. She had no idea that the beggar wiping wine from her eyes was actually the mysterious CEO of Vance Global, the very woman Victoria needed to sign an $800 million acquisition deal to save her family from a prison. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but in this case, it started with a glass of red wine. The morning sun filtered through the high-arched windows of the Sterling estate in Connecticut, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air, but it did little to warm the chilling atmosphere inside the breakfast nook. Ilara sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, nursing a cup of lukewarm tea. She was 26, with striking green eyes that usually held a spark of intelligence. But in this house, she learned to keep them lowered. To the outside world, the Sterlings were royalty titans of the shipping industry. To Ilara, they were jailers. Julian, honestly tell your wife to stop clinking her spoon. It's sounding like a construction site in here. Victoria Sterling snapped, not even looking up from her tablet. Victoria was a woman of 58 who fought the aging process with the ferocity of a cornered animal. Her face was pulled tight, her hair a perfect helmet of blonde, and her eyes were like chips of blue ice. Julian Sterling, Ilara's husband, sighed, rubbing his temples. He was handsome in a soft, pliable way, the kind of man who had never had to fight for anything in his life, because his mother fought all his battles for him. "Mom, she's just stirring her tea," Julian muttered, though he didn't look at Ilara either. "She's existing too loudly," Victoria corrected, finally glancing at Ilara with a look of pure disdain. "Ilara didn't. I ask you to steam my emerald silk gown for tonight. The gala is in 6 hours. Or is that too complicated for someone with your background?" Ilara slowly placed her spoon down. "I steamed it an hour ago, Victoria. It's hanging in your dressing room." "Mrs. Sterling," Victoria corrected sharply. "You might have tricked my son into a marriage license, but you haven't earned the right to call me by my first name. You are a guest in this house until Julian comes to his senses." Ilara's grip on the teacup tightened. It had been 2 years of this. 2 years of playing the role of the penniless orphan, the struggling graphic designer who had lucked into the Sterling fortune. Victoria made sure to remind her every day that she brought nothing to the table. If only she knew. If only Victoria knew that Ilara Smith was actually Ilara Vance, the estranged granddaughter of the late industrialist Arthur Vance. When Arthur died 3 years ago, he left his entire conglomerate, Vance Global, to Ilara. She controlled assets worth billions. She owned the banks the Sterlings owed money to. She owned the land their factories stood on. But she had kept it a secret. She wanted to be loved for herself, not her net worth. When she met Julian, he seemed different, kind, gentle. But as soon as the ring was on her finger and they moved into the family estate, the toxicity of the Sterling dynamic had consumed him. "The gala tonight is critical," Julian said, his voice trembling slightly. "We can't have any drama, Mum. The representatives from Vance Global are going to be there. If we don't close this $800 million buyout, Sterling shipping is finished. The creditors are circling." Victoria waved a dismissive hand. "Don't be dramatic, Julian. I have it under control. I've heard this new CEO of Vance Global, this elusive figure nobody has ever seen, is a woman. And women can be manipulated. I'll charm the board, we'll sign the papers, and we'll be liquid again by Monday." Ilara took a sip of tea to hide the small, dark smile playing on her lips. The elusive CEO is indeed a woman, she thought, and she is currently sitting at your table being told she exists too loudly. "Does Ilara have to come?" Victoria asked, as if Ilara wasn't sitting right there. "She looks like a frightened deer in headlights at these events. It's embarrassing. Tiffany Sinclair is back in town. She would be a much better accessory for you tonight, Julian." Julian flinched. Tiffany was his ex-fiancée, a woman with old money and a soul as black as Victoria's. "Ilara is my wife, Mom. She comes." "Fine," Victoria huffed. "But she wears what I tell her to wear. I won't have her showing up in some polyester rag she bought at a thrift store, and she speaks only when spoken to. We need to project power, Julian. Success. Not charity." Victoria stood up, her silk robe swishing around her ankles. She walked past Ilara, and with a subtle, calculated movement, knocked her elbow against Ilara's teacup. The cup tipped, spilling hot Earl Grey all over the table and onto Ilara's jeans. "Oh, for heaven's sake!" Victoria shrieked, playing the victim instantly. "Look at what you've done. That's an antique tablecloth, hand-stitched in 1920. You clumsy, useless girl." "You knocked it over," Ilara said calmly, standing up and grabbing a napkin. "Don't you dare lie to me," Victoria hissed, leaning in close, her perfume smelling of expensive lilies and malice. "Clean this up, now. And don't expect the maids to help you. You made the mess, you deal with it. It's about the only thing you're qualified for." Julian looked away, pretending to check his watch. "I have to get to the office. I'll see you both at the gala." He walked out. He left his wife dripping with hot tea on her knees, scrubbing the floor while his mother stood over her with a triumphant sneer. Ilara wiped the floor, her movements mechanical, but inside the fire was rising. She had given Julian 2 years to grow a spine. She had given Victoria 2 years to show a shred of humanity. Time was up. As soon as Victoria left the room, Ilara pulled a burner phone from her pocket, a sleek black device she kept hidden in the pantry. She dialed a number. "Ms. Vance," a deep voice answered on the first ring. It was Marcus, her chief operating officer and only confidant. "Is the paperwork ready for tonight?" "Marcus," Ilara asked, her voice shedding the meek tremble she used around Victoria and shifting into the icy command of a CEO. "It is prepared exactly as you instructed. The acquisition is structured as a hostile takeover, disguised as a merger. The moment you sign, you own 51% of Sterling Shipping. We have the leverage and the board." "They are flying in," They know you will be revealing yourself tonight. They are anxious to see how Mrs. Sterling reacts. Ilara looked down at the tea stain on her knee. She's worried about what I'm going to wear tonight. Make sure the package I ordered is delivered to the service entrance at 5:00 p.m. I want to look the part when I take everything she has. Understood. Good hunting, Miss Vance. Ilara hung up and stood. She wasn't just going to a party tonight. She was going to an execution, and she was the one holding the axe. The hours leading up to the Sterling annual charity gala were a masterclass in psychological warfare. The house was a flurry of activity stylists, makeup artists, and jewelers streaming in and out of Victoria's wing of the mansion. Ilara naturally was excluded from this. She sat in the small guest bedroom that had been converted into her office, though Victoria insisted she had no real work to do, staring at the clock. At 4:30 p.m., Victoria barged in without knocking, holding a dress bag that looked like it had been retrieved from the back of a dusty closet. "Here," Victoria said, tossing the bag onto the bed. "I found this. It's one of Tiffany's old bridesmaids' dresses from 5 years ago. It's a bit dated, but it should fit your common frame. Try not to rip it." Ilara unzipped the bag. It was a hideous shade of puce green with excessive ruffles that would make her look like a wilted cabbage. It was a deliberate attempt to make her look ridiculous next to the glamorous elite. "Thank you, Victoria," Ilara said neutrally. "And do something with your hair," Victoria commanded, checking her reflection in the mirror. "Pull it back. Tight. We don't need your frizz distracting the investors. Tonight is about the Vance Global deal. If you embarrass me in front of the Vance representatives, I will ensure you are on the street before midnight." "I understand. The Vance deal is very important to you." "Important." Victoria laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "It's life or death, you foolish girl. We need that cash injection. I've heard the Vance CEO is coming personally. I intend to charm her wine, her and dine her until she hands over the check. I've even prepared a speech about family values. Irony isn't your strong suit, is it?" "Family values," Ilara repeated. "I'm sure she'll be very interested in your views on that." Victoria narrowed her eyes, sensing a strange undertone, but dismissed it. Ilara was too mousy to be sarcastic. "Just get dressed. The limousine leaves in an hour. You're taking the second car with the assistants. I need the main car for myself and Julian to discuss strategy." Victoria swept out of the room. 30 minutes later, Ilara's phone buzzed. Her package had arrived at the service entrance. She slipped downstairs, avoiding the staff, and retrieved a sleek, matte black garment bag stamped with the logo of House of Givenchy. Beside it was a small, velvet-lined box containing a set of diamond and sapphire earrings from Cartier jewelry she had bought with her own money the Sterlings didn't know existed. She returned to her room and locked the door. She looked at the puce green dress Victoria had given her and unceremoniously shoved it into the trash can. She showered, scrubbing off the scent of the cleaning chemicals she'd been forced to use earlier. She dried her hair, letting the natural waves cascade down her back instead of pulling it into the severe bun Victoria had demanded. She applied her makeup bold sharp, accentuating her eyes. Then she stepped into the dress. It was a custom-made midnight blue velvet gown that hugged her figure like a second skin, with a slit up the left leg and an off-the-shoulder neckline that screamed elegance and power. It was the kind of dress that didn't just say money. It said old money. It said authority. She put on the sapphires. She looked in the mirror. The mouse was gone. The CEO was here. She heard the sound of the main limousine departing down the gravel driveway. Victoria and Julian had left without checking on her, assuming she would obediently put on the ugly green dress and follow in the staff car. Ilara picked up her phone. "Marcus, I'm ready." "The Rolls-Royce is waiting at the rear gate, Miss Vance," Marcus replied. "We'll arrive 10 minutes after them, just enough time for them to get comfortable." Ilara grabbed a long trench coat from her closet, a plain beige thing she had worn for years. She put it on over the gown, buttoning it all the way to her chin, completely hiding the luxury beneath. She slipped into a pair of worn-out flats, putting her diamond heels in a tote bag. She would enter as the mouse. She wanted Victoria to feel safe. She wanted Victoria to feel superior. Because the fall is always much harder when you're standing on a pedestal. The ride to the St. Regis Hotel where the gala was being held was smooth and silent. Ilara watched the city lights blur past. She thought about Julian. There was a time she hoped he would stand up for her, that he would choose her over his mother's toxicity. But today, when he left her cleaning the floor, that hope died. He was complicit. He was weak, and weakness in business and love was a liability. The car pulled up to the red carpet. Photographers were already flashing their bulbs. Ilara saw the sterling limousine ahead of her. Victoria was stepping out, waving to the press draped in furs and diamonds, with Julian by her side looking like a prized poodle, and hanging on Julian's other arm was Tiffany Sinclair. Ilara's eyes narrowed. Victoria hadn't just invited the ex. She had brought her as Julian's date, relegating Ilara to the staff car, or so she thought. Ilara waited until they had moved inside. She directed her driver to the side entrance. "I'll go in the back way. I need to check in with the team before I make my entrance." She entered the hotel, slipping past the busy catering staff, who ignored the woman in the beige trench coat. She found the private suite reserved for Vance Global. Inside, 6 lawyers in 3-piece suits stood up immediately. Marcus, a tall man with silver hair and a face carved from granite, stepped forward. "Madam President," he said, bowing slightly. "The sterling financial reports are open on the screen. It's worse than we thought. They have been embezzling from the employee pension fund to maintain their lifestyle." Ilara stared at the screen. Rage, cold and hard, settled in her chest. "They're stealing from their workers to buy antique tablecloths." "Yes. If you sign the deal tonight, we assume that liability. Unless we expose it," Ilara finished, "and force a restructuring that strips them of executive power." "Exactly. But Victoria Sterling is expecting a check, not an audit." Ilara unbuttoned the trench coat, letting it fall to the floor, revealing the midnight blue gown and the sapphires sparkling under the suite's chandelier. She stepped into her diamond heels, transforming instantly into a vision of intimidating beauty. "She's going to get neither," Ilara said, checking her reflection one last time. "She's going to get a lesson. The board is seated at table 1. The Sterlings are at table 2. They are expecting the CEO of Vance Global to arrive at 8:00 p.m. Ilara checked her watch. It was 7:45 p.m. "Let's go downstairs," she said. "But first I need to go say hello to my mother-in-law. I believe she's expecting a girl in a green dress." Ilara left the suite, walking toward the ballroom. The doors were guarded, but the security team saw the pin on her dress, the golden V crest of the event's main sponsor. They opened the doors wide. Music drifted out, a string quartet playing Mozart. The room was filled with the city's elite sipping champagne and gossiping. Ilara spotted them immediately. Table 2, center stage. Victoria was laughing loudly, holding a glass of wine, with Tiffany leaning seductively close to Julian. Ilara took a deep breath. She didn't head for the Vance Global table. She headed straight for Victoria. As she walked, heads turned. Not because they recognized her, they didn't. They turned because she radiated power. The dress, the walk, the jewels, She looked like a queen moving through a crowd of peasants. Victoria was mid-sentence, bragging to a senator's wife. "Oh yes, the Van deal is practically done. The CEO is desperate to work with us." Then she saw Ilara. For a second, Victoria didn't recognize her. She saw a stunning woman in a blue gown and assumed it was a celebrity. But as Ilara got closer, recognition dawned, replaced immediately by confusion and then fury. Ilara stopped right in front of the table. "Good evening, Victoria." Julian Ilara said, her voice smooth as silk. Victoria's jaw dropped. She looked at the expensive gown, the sapphires, the confidence. "What? What are you wearing? Where did you get that I told you to wear the green dress?" "I decided it didn't suit me," Ilara smiled. "And I thought I should dress appropriately for the night I change my life." Tiffany sneered, looking Ilara up and down. "Rental? Or did you steal it from my closet too, like you stole Julian?" "Careful, Tiffany," Ilara said, her eyes flashing. "You might bite your tongue." Victoria stood up, her face turning red. This was her nightmare. Her mousy daughter-in-law was upstaging her at her own event. "You ungrateful little wretch. You are making a scene. Go to the back and sit with the secretaries, or so help me God, I will have security throw you out." "I don't think security will be doing that," Ilara said calmly. "You think you're special because you put on a fancy dress." Victoria spat, her voice rising, drawing the attention of nearby tables. "You are nothing. You are a leech. You are here because I allow it. And right now I am revoking that allowance. Get out of my sight." "No," Ilara said, a simple, quiet word that rang like a bell. Victoria trembled with rage. She reached for her wine glass, the $4,000 Cabernet. "I said, get out." She didn't wait for a response. In a moment of pure elitist spite, thinking she could wash away this nuisance, as she had the tea earlier that morning, Victoria threw the contents of the glass forward. The red liquid splashed across Ilara's face, dripping down the expensive blue velvet, soaking into her hair. The music stopped. The ballroom went deathly silent. Victoria smirked, holding the empty glass. "Now look at you. Trash. Just like I said." Ilara stood still. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She slowly raised a hand and wiped the wine from her cheek. She looked at the red smear on her fingers. Then she looked at the entrance of the ballroom, where Marcus and the 6 lawyers had just entered. They were staring at the scene in horror. Ilara looked back at Victoria, her green eyes piercing through the wine stains. "That," Ilara whispered loud enough for the silent room to hear, "was an $800 million mistake." The silence in the St. Regis ballroom was heavy, suffocating. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. 300 of the city's wealthiest socialites, business tycoons and politicians were frozen, their eyes locked on the tableau at table 2. Wine dripped from Ilara's chin. It stained the midnight blue velvet of her bodice, a deep, bruised purple. It ran down her arm, pooling on the expensive linen tablecloth. Victoria Sterling stood with her hand still extended, the empty glass clutched in her manicured fingers. Her chest heaved with the adrenaline of her cruelty. She looked around the room, expecting nodding approval, expecting her peers to join her in scorning the intruder. Instead, she saw shock. She saw the senator's wife cover her mouth. She saw the waitstaff pause mid-step. "Well," Victoria's voice shrilled, cracking the silence. "Why is everyone staring? The trash needed to be taken out. I merely accelerated the process." Julian sat frozen, his face pale. He looked at his wife, soaked, humiliated, and for a fleeting second, shame flickered in his eyes. He reached for a napkin. "Ilara, He started, his hand shaking. "Don't you dare, Julian," Victoria snapped, slapping his hand away. She brought this on herself. Look at her, standing there like a wet dog. Go on, girl. Run away. Go cry in the parking lot. Ilara didn't move. She didn't run. She didn't even blink. She slowly reached into her clutch, pulled out a small, compact mirror, and checked her reflection. The wine had ruined her makeup, but it hadn't touched the fire in her eyes. You really should learn to control your temper. Victoria, Ilara said, her voice terrifyingly calm. It's bad for business. Business? Tiffany Sinclair laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. What would you know about business? You're a graphic designer who can't even afford a dress without Julian's credit card. Is that so? Ilara asked softly. At that moment, the double doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open again. But this wasn't a guest arriving late. It was a procession. Marcus, the silver-haired COO of Vance Global, walked with a purposeful, predatory stride. Flanking him were the 6 lawyers carrying briefcases that looked like weapons. Behind them came 4 large men in dark suits, with earpieces, private security, far more imposing than the hotel staff. The crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Everyone knew who these men were. They were the executioners from Vance Global, the people holding the fate of the Sterling Empire in their hands. Victoria's face lit up, masking her earlier rage with a practiced plastic smile. She smoothed her dress, oblivious to the fact that she was still holding the wine glass. "Ah, the delegation," Victoria announced, turning her back on Ilara. "Finally, gentlemen, welcome. I apologize for the little domestic disturbance. Just a disgruntled relative. Please ignore her. Come sit, let's discuss the future." She gestured grandly to the empty seats at her table. Marcus didn't look at her. He walked straight past Victoria's outstretched hand. He walked past Julian, who was cowering in his seat. He walked past Tiffany, who was checking her lipstick. He stopped directly in front of Ilara. The room gasped. Marcus took a white silk handkerchief from his breast pocket. With a gesture of profound respect, he offered it to the woman dripping with wine. "Madam President," Marcus said, his deep voice carrying to the back of the room, "I apologize for the delay. We were reviewing the final compliance reports." Ilara took the handkerchief and dabbed her cheek. "Thank you, Marcus. Did you see the arrival?" "I did, Mum," Marcus replied, his eyes cold, as he glanced at Victoria. "We have the footage from the security cameras. It will serve as excellent evidence for the assault charges, should you wish to press them." Victoria's smile faltered. Her brain couldn't process the image in front of her. The powerful executive from Vance Global was bowing to her daughter-in-law. "Excuse me." Victoria laughed, nervously stepping between them. "Sir, I think there's been a mistake. That is Ilara. She's nobody. I am Victoria Sterling. I am the one you're here to meet. I am the owner of Sterling Shipping." Marcus slowly turned his head to look at Victoria. He looked at her like one might look at a bug on a windshield. "We are not here to meet you, Mrs. Sterling," Marcus said. "We report to the CEO of Vance Global, and we generally prefer our CEO not to be marinated in cheap Cabernet." "CEO," Victoria whispered. "But the CEO is a Vance, the granddaughter of Arthur Vance." Ilara stepped forward. The heels of her diamond shoes clicked ominously on the marble floor. She dropped the wine-soaked handkerchief onto Julian's lap. "My name," Ilara said, her voice projecting clear and strong, "is Ilara Vance. Arthur was my grandfather. And for the last 2 years, while you treated me like a servant in your home, I have owned the bank that holds your mortgage, the firm that insures your ships, and as of this morning, I own the debt that is keeping you out of federal prison." The color drained from Victoria's face so fast she looked like a corpse. "No," Julian stammered, standing up. Ilara, that's impossible. You're from Ohio. You said your parents were teachers. My parents were teachers, Ilara corrected, looking at her husband with pity. They walked away from the family fortune. But when they died, it passed to me. I wanted a normal life, Julian. I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I owned. I thought you were the one. She looked at the wine stain on her dress. I see now how wrong I was. The revelation hung in the air, vibrating with tension. The whispers started instantly, a low roar of gossip spreading like wildfire. Ilara Vance, the heiress, the secret billionaire. Victoria was shaking. Her world was tilting on its axis. This is a lie, she hissed, though her voice lacked conviction. It's a prank. You hired these actors. You think you can humiliate me. Marcus, Ilara said, ignoring Victoria completely. Set up the display. Yes, ma'am. One of the lawyers opened a briefcase and connected a tablet to the ballroom's main projection system. The massive screen behind the stage, usually reserved for charity videos and donor lists, flickered to life. Instead of a montage of smiling children, a complex financial spreadsheet appeared. Its headers were red, blood red. Ilara walked up the stairs to the stage. She didn't need a microphone. The acoustics of the room and the utter silence of the audience carried her voice. But she took the podium anyway. She gripped it with authority, the wine stain on her dress now looking less like a mark of shame and more like war paint. Ladies and gentlemen, Ilara began addressing the room. I apologize for the interruption to your evening, but since my mother-in-law was so eager to discuss business in public, I think it's only fair we finish the conversation. She pointed to the screen. This is the current balance sheet of Sterling Shipping. As you can see, the company is not just insolvent, it is hemorrhaging cash, $300 million in debt, assets leveraged at 150%. A gasp went through the crowd. Sterling Shipping was supposed to be a pillar of the industry. Lies! Victoria screamed from the floor. Turn it off, security. Remove her. The hotel security did not move. They were watching the Vance Global bodyguards, who stood like stone statues at the base of the stage. But bad business is one thing, Ilara continued, her voice hardening. Fraud is another. She swiped her finger across a tablet Marcus had handed her. The screen changed. It showed bank transfers. For the past 5 years, Victoria Sterling has been siphoning money from the company's employee pension fund to pay for her personal expenses. The jewelry you see on her neck tonight, paid for by the retirement savings of dock workers. The renovation of the estate stolen from the maintenance budget of the fleet. The crowd turned on Victoria. The elite of Connecticut could forgive bankruptcy, it happened, but stealing from the pension fund. That was white-collar crime that got people ostracized. That was dirty. You have no proof, Victoria shrieked, looking around wildly for support. Julian, do something, she's slandering us. Julian was staring at the screen, his mouth open. Mum, is that true? The pension fund. You told me that account was a family trust. Shut up, you idiot! Victoria hissed at him. Ilara looked down from the stage. It's all true, Julian, and because I am the majority creditor, I ordered a forensic audit 3 months ago. The report was finalized this morning. That's why I was existing too loudly at breakfast. I was reading the evidence of your mother's crimes. Ilara stepped out from behind the podium and walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at the table where she had been humiliated just minutes before. You wanted to sign a deal tonight, Victoria. You wanted Vance Global to acquire Sterling Shipping for $800 million. Yes, Victoria said, her voice trembling, trying to regain some footing. Yes, Ilara. Look, we're family. We can work this out. If you buy the company, the debt goes away. We can restructure. I can step down as CEO. Julian can take over. We can keep this in the family." Victoria's desperation was palpable. She was bargaining for her life. Elara laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You don't understand, Victoria. There is no deal. There never was an acquisition offer." "What?" Julian asked, stepping forward. "But the paperwork, the meetings." "It was a trap," Elara said simply. "I bought your debt so that no one else could. I cornered you. I wanted to see if when the pressure was on you would treat me with even a shred of decency. I wanted to see if my husband would protect me or sell me out for a payout." She looked at Julian, her eyes full of sorrow. "You failed, Julian. You failed spectacularly." Elara turned to Marcus. "Execute the default clause." Marcus nodded and typed a command on his phone. A loud ping echoed from Julian's pocket, then Victoria's, then Tiffany's. It was the sound of notifications arriving simultaneously. Julian pulled out his phone. His face went grey. "My accounts, they're frozen. All of them." Victoria checked hers. "My credit cards, cancelled." Elara stood tall on the stage. "As the primary creditor, Vance Global has just called in the loans. Since you cannot pay, we have initiated immediate seizure of assets. The Sterling estate is no longer yours. The cars outside are no longer yours. Even that wine you poured on me, Victoria. Technically, I paid for that too." The reality of the situation crashed down on the Sterling table. In a matter of 10 minutes, they had gone from royalty to destitute. Tiffany Sinclair, realizing the ship was sinking, tried to distance herself. She stood up, grabbing her clutch. "Well, this is very tragic, but I really must be going. Julian, don't call me." She turned to leave her heels clicking fast on the marble. "Not so fast, Tiffany," Elara called out from the stage. Tiffany froze. "Marcus, show slide 4, Elara commanded. The screen changed again. It showed a series of emails. "You think I didn't know?" Elara asked. "You and Victoria have been plotting to get Julian to divorce me for 6 months. These emails detail how you planned to hide Julian's assets during the divorce proceedings, so I would get nothing. That's conspiracy to commit fraud." Tiffany turned pale. I was just joking. It was girl talk." "The district attorney won't think it's funny," Elara said. "My legal team has already forwarded these to the authorities. You're an accessory, Tiffany. If I were you, I wouldn't leave town." Tiffany sank back into her chair, burying her face in her hands. Now it was just the Sterlings left to face the music. Victoria stripped of her dignity, and her money finally snapped. She lunged toward the stage, her face twisted in a snarl. "You ungrateful little witch! After everything I did for you, I gave you a roof over your head. I let you eat at my table." 2 of the Vance security guards stepped forward, blocking her path effortlessly. Victoria bounced off them, stumbling back. "You didn't give me a roof," Elara said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was somehow louder than her shouting. "You gave me a cage, and I just bought the key." Elara walked down the stairs, descending from the stage like a goddess of vengeance. She walked up to Julian. He looked at her, tears streaming down his face. "Elara, please. I didn't know about the fraud. I didn't know she was stealing. You know I'm not like that. I love you." "Do you?" Elara asked, tilting her head. "Do you love me, Julian? Or do you love the idea of someone who waits on you? Someone who takes your mother's abuse so you don't have to—" "I was scared of her," Julian admitted, his voice breaking. She's controlling. You know that. But we can start over. Now that I know who you are. Now that we have the money." Elara recoiled as if he had slapped her. "That is exactly the problem, Julian. Now that we have the money. You didn't respect me when I was poor. You don't get to love me now that I'm rich. She pulled off her wedding ring. It was a modest band Julian hadn't bothered to buy her a diamond, claiming money was tight back then. She held it up. "I want a divorce." "No," Julian begged, falling to his knees. "No, Elara, please, I'll lose everything." "You already have," she said, dropping the ring into his palm. "Marcus, hand him the papers." Marcus stepped forward and slapped a thick envelope onto Julian's chest. "You'll find the terms quite generous," Marcus said dryly. "Ms. Vance is allowing you to keep your personal vehicle, a 2018 sedan, assuming you can make the payments." Victoria was sobbing now, a heap of emerald silk on the floor. "Where will we go? You took the house. You took the accounts." Elara looked down at her mother-in-law. She remembered the tea this morning. She remembered the green dress. She remembered the wine. "I hear the Motel 6 on the highway has vacancies," Elara said coldly. "But you might have to steam your own clothes." Elara turned around, her midnight blue dress swirling around her legs. "Marcus, let's go. The air in here is stale." She began to walk away, the Vance team forming a phalanx around her. "Wait!" Victoria screamed. "You can't do this. We are Sterlings. We are this city." Elara paused and looked back over her shoulder. "Not anymore," she said. "Now you're just cautionary tales." As Elara walked toward the exit, the police sirens began to wail in the distance, getting louder and louder. They weren't coming for a noise complaint. They were coming for the embezzlement. But just as Elara reached the doors, a man in a tuxedo stepped out from the crowd. It was Arthur Vance's old attorney, a man named Sterling's rival, Mr. Henderson. "Ms. Vance," Henderson said, blocking her path. He looked grim. "There is one problem." Elara stopped. "What is it, Henderson?" "The acquisition," he said quietly, so only she could hear. "The deal. Victoria signed a clause yesterday that you might have missed in the audit. A poison pill protocol attached to the land rights." Elara frowned. "Explain." "If the company goes bankrupt," Henderson whispered, "the land doesn't go to the creditors, it reverts to the state, and the environmental cleanup liability, it transfers to the majority shareholder personally." Elara's eyes widened. If she seized the company now, she wouldn't just be taking their assets. She would be inheriting a toxic waste cleanup bill that could bankrupt even Vance Global. Victoria, in her incompetence, had rigged the ship to blow up if it ever sank. Elara looked back at Victoria, who was being handcuffed by the arriving police officers. Victoria didn't know about the clause. She was too stupid to understand it, but she had accidentally laid one final trap. Elara had to make a choice. Destroy the Sterlings and take $1 billion hit, or save the company to save herself, effectively keeping Julian and Victoria out of total ruin. She looked at Marcus. "Get the legal team in the car. Now. We have a new problem." The back of the Rolls-Royce was silent, save for the hum of the tires on the asphalt. The euphoria of the ballroom reveal had evaporated, replaced by a thick, suffocating tension. Elara sat with her laptop open, the blue light illuminating her face. She was still wearing the wine-stained gown, a stark reminder of the night's chaos. Beside her, Henderson, the attorney who had delivered the bad news, looked grim. "Walk me through it again, Henderson," Elara said, rubbing her temples. "How did we miss this?" "It wasn't in the digital files, Ms. Vance," Henderson explained, his voice low. "Victoria Sterling is old-fashioned. She kept a physical ledger for the land deeds of the old shipyard, the Sterling Point facility. It turns out that facility was built on a chemical dumping ground in the 80s. The EPA didn't know about it, because the Sterlings buried the reports." Marcus, sitting opposite them, swore softly. "And the poison pill." Victoria signed a clause with the local municipality 5 years ago to get a tax break, Henderson continued. It states that if Sterling Shipping ever changes majority ownership or declares bankruptcy, the grandfather clause, protecting them from environmental liability, is voided. The new owner must pay for a total soil remediation immediately. How much? Ilara asked. Henderson hesitated. Preliminary estimates, $2 billion. It would wipe out Vance Global's liquidity. It would ruin you, Ilara. Ilara stared out the window. The city lights blurred. She had won the battle, but she was about to lose the war. If she finalized the seizure of the Sterling assets tonight to punish Victoria, she would inherit a $2 billion debt. If she walked away, the Sterlings would keep their company, albeit a failing one, and Victoria would likely find a way to wriggle out of the fraud charges, claiming the pension theft was a clerical error. She needed a third option. Where are they taking Victoria and Julian? Ilara asked. The 12th precinct, Marcus replied, for questioning regarding the pension fraud, but without your testimony and the finalized forensic audit as part of a takeover, the DA might not have enough to hold them for long. They have expensive lawyers. Ilara closed her laptop with a sharp snap. Turn the car around, she commanded. Ma'am? The driver asked. Take me to the precinct. I need to speak to my husband. The interrogation room was cold, smelling of stale coffee and fear. Julian Sterling sat at the metal table, his tuxedo jacket crumpled his tie loose. He looked like a child who had lost his mother in a supermarket. When the door opened and Ilara walked in, he looked up with a glimmer of hope. Ilara. He scrambled up. Thank God. You're here to drop the charges, right? You're here to bail me out. Look, I told them I didn't know anything about the pension fund. That was all, Mom. Ilara didn't sit. She stood by the door, the trench coat pulled tight around her again. Sit down, Julian. He sat his hands trembling. Ilara, please. I love you. We can fix this. I know you're rich. Now that's amazing. We can go to Paris. We can finally buy that house in the Hamptons you liked. Ilara looked at him with a mixture of pity and disgust. He was still trying to spend her money. He hadn't changed. There is no we, Julian. I'm filing the divorce papers tomorrow. But right now, we have a business problem. She tossed a file onto the table. It was the deed to the Sterling Point shipyard. Your mother hid the toxicity reports. If I take the company, I pay for the cleanup. I'm not going to do that. Julian blinked, confused. So, you're letting us go? You're walking away? No, Ilara said coldly. If I walk away, the company goes bankrupt anyway, and you and your mother go to prison for fraud. But I have a proposal. She leaned in, placing her hands on the table. I know about the founder's share. Julian froze. His eyes widened. The founder's share was a secret stock class created by Julian's father. It held 10% of the voting power, but more importantly, it carried a specific immunity clause regarding the land deals separating the holder from the executive decisions of the CEO. Julian had inherited it when he turned 25, but Victoria had forbidden him from ever using it, terrified it would dilute her power. I can't use that, Julian stammered. Mum said never to touch it. Your mother is in the cell next door, facing 20 years for embezzlement, Ilara said. She doesn't control you anymore, Julian, unless you want her to. Ilara pulled a document from her bag. This is a transfer of authority. You sign the founder's share over to me. This gives me the legal standing to fire the CEO, your mother, before I acquire the company. If I fire her for gross negligence regarding the environmental cover-up, the liability stays with her personal estate, not the company. Julian's mouth fell open. You want me to? To pin the $2 billion on Mum. She did the crime, Julian. She hid the waste. Why should Vance Global pay for it? Why should I pay for it? But if I sign this, she'll be destitute. They'll take everything she has. The offshore accounts, the jewelry, the hidden properties. She'll have nothing. And if you don't sign it, Elara said softly, I will let the DA know that you co-signed the checks for the pension fund withdrawals. I saw your signature, Julian. You weren't innocent. You were compliant. Julian went pale. I can grant you immunity. Julian. Elara offered the final twist of the knife. Sign the share to me. Help me destroy her, and I will ensure you walk out of here tonight. You won't have the sterling fortune, but you'll have your freedom. Julian looked at the pen. He looked at the mirror behind which he knew detectives were watching. He thought about his mother, her screaming, her controlling nature, the way she had humiliated him for years. Then he thought about prison. She always called me weak, Julian whispered, picking up the pen. She was right, Elara said. Julian signed the paper. The morning sun hit the steps of the courthouse, blinding the swarm of paparazzi that had gathered. The news had broken overnight. The Sterling Empire had fallen. Victoria Sterling was being led out in handcuffs, but not to a waiting limousine. She was being transferred to a federal detention center. She wore an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with her pale, shocked complexion. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, she saw them. Elara stood by her Rolls-Royce, looking impeccable, in a white business suit, sharp, clean, and victorious. Standing a few feet away was Julian, looking disheveled, holding a small duffel bag. Victoria lunged toward them, restrained by the marshals. "Julian!" she screamed. Tell them it's a mistake. Get the lawyers." Julian couldn't look her in the eye. He stared at his shoes. "He can't help you, Victoria," Elara said, her voice cutting through the noise of the camera shutters. "He gave up his founder's share. I own the company now. And I've already terminated you for cause." Victoria stopped struggling. She looked at her son. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "You," she hissed at Julian, "you traitor! You spineless little worm! I gave you everything. You gave me nothing." Julian suddenly shouted, his voice cracking. He looked up, tears in his eyes. "You made me a joke. You made me hate my own wife. You made me a criminal. I made you a sterling." Victoria spat back. "There are no sterlings anymore," Elara interjected calmly. "The name is toxic, literally and figuratively. As of this morning, the company is being rebranded under the Vance Global umbrella. The assets are being liquidated to pay back the pension fund you stole." Elara stepped closer to Victoria, just out of reach. "Do you remember the wine, Victoria? Do you remember calling me a beggar?" Victoria glared, hatred burning in her eyes. But she said nothing. "I'm going to make sure the prison commissary is well stocked," Elara said, a faint, cold smile playing on her lips. "I hear the grape juice is terrible." The marshals shoved Victoria into the van. The door slammed shut, sealing her fate. Elara turned to Julian. He looked at her, a pathetic hope in his eyes. "So," Julian said, "it's over. She's gone." "Yes." "And us?" Julian asked, taking a step toward her. "Elara, I saved you. I signed the paper. I chose you over her." Elara looked at him. She remembered the man she thought she loved. But looking at him now, she realized he hadn't chosen her. He had chosen survival. He had sold out his own mother to save his own skin. A man who would betray his mother would eventually betray his wife again. "You chose yourself, Julian," Elara corrected him. She signaled to Marcus. The bodyguard handed Julian a set of keys. "What's this?" Julian asked. "The keys to your 2018 sedan," Elara said. "It's parked around the corner. It's fully paid off, and there's a check in the glove compartment for $5,000. That's enough for a deposit on an apartment and a few weeks of food. 5,000, Julian gasped. Ilara, you're worth billions. We were married. And now we're not, Ilara said, turning her back on him. My lawyers will mail you the divorce decree. Do not contact me again, Julian. If you do, I'll consider it harassment, and I'll have your immunity deal revoked. Ilara, he shouted as she walked toward the Rolls-Royce. Ilara, you can't leave me like this. I have nothing. I don't know how to work. I've never had a job. Ilara paused with her hand on the car door. She looked back one last time. Then I suggest you learn, she said. I hear the cleaning staff at the St. Regis is hiring. You already know where the stains are. She got into the car. The heavy door thudded shut, sealing out his pleas. As the car pulled away, merging into the city traffic, Ilara didn't look back. She picked up her tablet. Marcus, she said, her voice steady and clear. Yes, Madam President. Initiate the rebranding and send a bonus to the staff at the Sterling estate. They were the only ones in that house who treated me with kindness. I want to make sure they're taken care of. Consider it done. Ilara looked out the window at the skyline. She was alone, but for the first time in 2 years, she wasn't lonely. She was free. The wine stain was gone. The mouse was gone. The Queen had returned to her throne, and that is how Ilara Vance turned a glass of spilled wine into a billion-dollar empire. She proved that dignity isn't about what you wear or who your family is. It's about how you carry yourself when the world tries to tear you down. Victoria and Julian Sterling learned the hard way that when you treat people like dirt, eventually you get buried in it. It's a classic reminder. Be careful who you step on while climbing the ladder, because they might be the ones holding it up. What did you think of Julian's choice at the end? Did he deserve a second chance, or did Ilara give him exactly what he deserved? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get a debate going. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please crush that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new dramas every week. Thanks for watching, and remember, the best revenge is massive success. See you in the next video.